While we're waiting to get started, if you would like to follow the prompt here, post in chat what is working for your organization in this area. DEI work, what's working for you? This will give us a chance to share best practices with each other.
Hello, Sarah.
I think I heard a hello. Hello, Tanya.
I know, I just sent you a quick little message.
Sorry, I had a little issue getting logged in this morning.
So no worries. Welcome back. Let's see. Okay. Does everybody, and before we get going, my name is Tanya Schumann. I'm with Resources Unlimited. So welcome to everybody who has decided to spend the next hour with Phil and I. Phil is one of the master trainers that works with us. He's absolutely amazing. The perfect person to do diversity, equity, and inclusion webinar with us. I am going to turn this over to Phil here shortly, but there is a screen, hopefully. Oh, here we go. What is working? Okay.
Great. Thanks for those, Mary, Kathy, Dell. That's awesome.
So Phil, I'm going to turn this over to you. And I hope everyone enjoys the next 55 minutes.
Sounds great. Hey, I want this to be an interactive session where you all can share what's working for you. So I've put there on our first slide, if you've got something that's really working for you, go ahead and put it in chat so the rest of the participants can see that and get a feel for what's going on around the country. Today we're going to talk about DEI, and although I've done DEI training, I'm not an expert in DEI, and I know it's called different things in different places. But what I'm an expert at is getting people to talk to each other without animosity. And so a lot of the training that I'm going to show you today are very simple tools to get people to collaboratively interact with each other in meaningful ways. And I think you'll find these tools are useful for a number of things. But as we've looked across the DEI landscape, we've realized that this set of methodologies is perfect for creating collaborative discussion. So I want to show you the tool set to begin with. We won't go through all these today, but this is the De Bono tool set. These are all methodologies created by Edward De Bono. And there are 6 different tool sets. The first one you may be familiar with, 6 Thinking Hats. It's very popular, and I'll show you how that one works. I'll also show you about power of perception, which you may not have heard of. And then there's also the 6 value metals, lateral thinking, and simplicity. All of these tools have one thing in common. What they're doing is they're helping shift your perception with the idea that the broader, the deeper your perception, the better your perspective. And so what I'd like to do is go through and talk about some of the tools that we're using in employee engagement, retention, and DEI work, and then show you how these De Bono methodologies are added to the mix. Thanks for posting your successes in chat. Those are great to see. And so let's go, and I'll show you a couple that are working really well. One is SCARF. How many of you are familiar with SCARF? Give me a thumbs up if that's something you've seen before or you're using it. SCARF is an acronym from the Neuro Leadership Institute. It stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And what SCARF is it's looking at social threat. That is extremely helpful in DEI work. The other one is just looking at emotional intelligence and being able to think about those 5 skills and how we develop those skills of relatedness, empathy, and so on. But I want to talk to you quickly about SCARF, and then we'll go to one of DeBono's tools called parallel thinking. Here's a slide that I created when we began to roll out SCARF in a large hospital system. We were using at the time the Gallup 12 engagement questions, and those are listed there on the left. Those aren't the actual questions themselves, but they're the result that you're trying to get. So in other words, if an employee was feeling engaged at your workplace, they would answer yes to all those that are in green. And then if you think about the qualities of social threat, each of these is met by a certain set of those questions. And so when we began to put those two together, we began training managers that if they wanted to see their employee engagement go up, they needed to be able to be safe for their employees to talk to. And so we began to give them tools around how to use SCARF day to day. And that's been highly successful. So I know there's a lot of great tools out there, but I want to show you another one. And to start off with parallel thinking, which is my next topic, I'd like for you to post in chat again real quick the answer to this question. When you try to get people talking to one another, meaningful, heartfelt understanding, what is the biggest challenge for you in the area of DEI? Where are you seeing resistance or friction? And if you would just type a couple words in the chat from your perspective, that'd be helpful. Cody and Dee, thanks for your input there. Yeah, making it safe. Fear of being shamed. Good. Yes. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah. Oh, Kathy, I feel it. I feel the same thing. Yep. I'm always worried if I say a certain word, I'll get somebody after the class tell me, we don't use that word anymore. I'm like, okay, thanks. Yes. Yeah, any kind of ism or ist, I don't want to be called or known by that, right? So in the companies that I've worked with, that RU Resources has worked with, we're noticing a lot of this, and they sort of fall into 3 categories. The first is it's just creating a psychologically safe place. And so those first 3 bullet points are all around helping remove some of that fear. And then the second part of it seems to be around not making things worse. So if you get into a psychologically safe environment and then people start to say things because they feel safe, sometimes you get into really what would be described more as argument than understanding. And then the final one is, what's the point of all this conversation? Is it going to ever move beyond, oh, I feel your pain, or I understand you better? Is it going to change anything in the organization? And so when we look at trying to create the kinds of dialogues that lead to equity, there's a fear component, there's a debate component, I would say, or a opinion counterpoint type of thing. And then there's a kind of, I think, a lingering question, usually from management, that says, why are we doing this? What's the point? Why are we going to all this effort in this area? And what's it going to lead to? And so I want to show you what parallel thinking is. This comes from Edward DeBono's book, 6 Thinking Hats. This is taught all over the world, but it's not presently being used in DEI formats in companies that I'm aware of, and we'd like to introduce it that way. So here's how parallel thinking works. The big idea is, if you're going to explore a topic, let's both see that topic from the same perception, and then let's shift and see it from another perception. So in this case, the 2 people involved in the discussion, person A and person B, would first both look in one direction together, and then at the topic, at the focus, and then they would look in another direction together at the topic. That's different from this, where I'm showing my view and you're showing your view, but neither of us is looking at the other side. So here's a quick example. If we have a conversation about, let's say, chocolate and vanilla, well, A's got an opinion, B's got an opinion. And for that topic, who cares? I mean, it's not a big deal. But if we made that topic a little more sensitive, then now there's a little bit higher stakes. And I know you can imagine if we made that topic even more sensitive by putting it into a DEI kind of framework, automatically you have some people sharing their view and other people sharing a different view. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what tends to happen is we've gotten very good in our society at doing this sort of adversarial point counterpoint, yeah, but kind of conversation. And it often looks or feels more like this. And of course, those kinds of conversations are not much fun to be a part of, and they don't usually result in anyone changing their mind or being more informed or being more sensitive or being more, in touch with their own situation. In fact, if I ask you what are the usual results of this kind of adversarial approach or point counterpoint, what would you say is probably going to happen if we only use this approach to hard topics?
I would say polarization.
Yeah, exactly what we have right now. Yeah, a lot of posturing. Thank you, Lori. Yeah, a lot of polarization, and that's just par for the course. That's just how things tend to be right now. We have a great need to express our opinions, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when we run up against a different opinion, then for whatever reason, we just seem to have to ask the question, who's right? And it's not always about who's right and wrong. And yet in the courtroom, in politics, in most of your news talk shows, there's this idea that one view is right and the other one is wrong. And we get a lot of this negative, emotive, affective response. So what parallel thinking is trying to do is to get us out of this debate type conversation. And what I found in my DEI work is that when hard topics come up, not knowing anybody, people go to a sort of point counterpoint debate style. And that doesn't work. And it doesn't work because of this stuff, but it also doesn't work because sometimes the majority voice or the voice that's in power is significantly better able to broadcast their opinion. And so what normally happens is there's a group that sort of wins the argument just by sheer volume, and another group that probably wasn't heard. Now let's contrast that with de Bono's 6 thinking hats technique, which we've called parallel thinking. In this case, both A and B would look at the merits of A's point of view, and they would do that at the same time together. Makes perfect sense. Don't know why we can't do this. And then they would look from B's perspective, again, together, to see the merits of B's case, so that they both have an appreciation for the other's experience and needs. What this means at that point is B still may have their point of view, but at least now they understand A's point of view. And A may not change their mind, that's okay, but they at least understand B's point of view. And this technique, parallel thinking, allows these kinds of conversations. And what we're finding is when we use these for DEI work, we begin to notice that A, because they understand B's view, begins to think of having 2 answers instead of 1, and they're able to then enter a dialogue. So in this case, A would say, well, I still believe my viewpoint, but now I understand your viewpoint. And in doing so, I realized that some of what I thought was right and some of it was wrong. And the nice thing is B can say the same thing. I now understand your viewpoint, and I realize that what I said was right, but there's also another side to the story. This is called parallel thinking. It's a 6 hats. The basic technique is to use the 6 thinking hats to make it happen. but I wanted to show you this one because I think this is the tool for any kind of serious collaborative dialogue. And I haven't found a better one, and this one seems to be lacking. What do you think about this approach? Could you use something like this? If I showed you how to make it happen, would you want it? This is a huge challenge for us. And I know that, nothing really works if there's not trust in the room. But I've also realized that sometimes getting to trust means being able to have an honest appreciation of the other person's where they're coming from. And, as a person like me, I don't always see the other side. And so I have assumptions and I have biases that I'm not even aware of. And this gives me a chance to unpack those in a collaborative way, doing it with people instead of in a debate. Yeah, I totally agree, Kathy. It's all about perspective taking. And if I can see more of what's going on, I can respond better. All right, I'm going to jump off of that one for a second because I know we only have a few minutes today, and I want to share a little bit at the end to give you time for questions. Let me show you another tool. If you've been using Seeds of Bias by Neuroleadership, Seeds of Bias is a program, talks about the 5 general categories of implicit bias. So this is the way your brain is offloading work from the executive functions by taking shortcuts that you're not aware of. That's a fantastic class. The big idea is if you have a brain, you're biased, and it's not about prejudice per se, but you have your brain is already leaning in a certain direction most of the time. And if you know that, you can counteract that or mitigate it when you need to. And then also any courses that you've seen by Patrick Lencioni, he's most famous for the course, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, but Resources Unlimited teaches that course and another course similar to it. And Lencioni, I believe, is one of the best out there for conveying the idea that trust is the foundation of communication. To that end, another tool set that De Bono offers is called The Power of Perception. And these are 10 prompts designed to shift perception on demand. So it would be like saying, let's take a look at something. Let's look at it from the top. Let's look at it from the bottom. And let's look at it from the side. Now I have 3 different angles. I appreciate that object in 3 different ways. Or you might say, if I was exploring some territory, I could say, well, let's look north, and let's look south, and let's look east and west. And because I've done a pretty good job of a 360 around me, I now have a better appreciation of where I stand. I want to show you a couple of these prompts, but I'd like us to play with them for a minute. I'll explain them and then we can do it. But imagine that you're introducing any new program at work. These 2 prompts, FIP and CNS, are prompts that are super helpful when you're beginning to roll out a program. And FIP stands for the first most important priority. So what is the thing that, if not accomplished, makes all the rest of the effort worthless? And I'd like for you to think about a program that you're rolling out or one you've just rolled out, and without naming the program, put in chat, what is the thing that if it doesn't happen, the rest of the program is probably worthless? I'll give you a minute to do that, and then I'll go on to the CNS component. Yeah. Great. Those are beautiful. So sometimes when we're talking to upper management and we need to help them appreciate what our programs are trying to do, it's helpful to announce right up front what the FIP is, what the first most important priority is, so that they understand that's the outcome, that's the result we're trying to get to. And if we don't get to that, the whole program might as well be scuttled right at the beginning. Let's do the same thing with the second prompt. This is called Consequence and Sequel. And what it's asking is, what are the positive and negative consequences over certain time periods? So it's not just asking what's good and bad, pros and cons. It's asking what are the impacts over a time period, and you get to pick the time period. So this one, let's do the same thing. What are the potential negative impacts of rolling out a program? The day it's first announced, that's one time frame. The end of the first quarter after it's up and running, and then at the end of the first year. See if you can think about a program you've recently rolled out. What was different between 1, 2, and 3? What did 1 look like, 2 look like, 3 look like? Again, if you don't mind throwing it into chat, then we can all see each other's thinking. Yeah, good. So you get that initial burst of momentum, and then first quarter rolls around. We're checking now for continued interest, and then a year later, maybe we're looking at how to freshen it up, keep it real. That's great. Thanks for that. Yeah, good, Cindy. Yeah, confusion, low adoption, yeah, and abandonment. That sounds like the change curve, doesn't it? What CNS and FIP do for us is they give us a particular way of looking at challenges in the workplace, and then being able to have a conversation about those challenges because we had a framework to look through. And so Power of Perception course has 10 of these prompts, and each one of them provides a different perspective on the problem. Yeah, thanks, Lori. And so, that might be the thing where I would sit back and I would say, okay, if I know that if we're going to have conflicts with, regular work, and we're maybe have some enthusiasm that's going to wane, and then we're going to have people trying to do 2 things at once and getting burned out. If those are the negative impacts that I can appreciate up front because I've used this prompt, then how do we solve for those? How would we move forward if those things occur? And so now my effort is not just about program management, it's about change management. I'm trying to make sure that the change sticks and that long-term we get some results. Let me show you one more set where we've been looking at navigating conversations. If you're familiar with DISC work styles, you know that people have a predictable pattern that they prefer. We know that DISC is a stereotype, but it's a very accurate stereotype in the sense that there's sort of an assortment of ways to do something, and people fall into a certain approach. And so when they fall into that approach, then that changes their communication style. It changes how they resolve conflict. It brings forward their fears and so on. In a work culture, if your people understand and know work style logic, then a lot of what I consider the kind of stupid people tricks that happens, the kind of immaturity goes away because I give people the benefit of the doubt. So for instance, Del, thanks for sharing, when the D style is quick and abrupt and maybe doesn't listen as closely as I would like him to, I don't take that personally. I don't take that as an offense. I just recognize that for whatever reason, Del that day was working in a get stuff done mode, and he was powering through to overcome obstacles. Now, if I can appreciate that as an individual, then a lot of the things that I might have thought were personal slights or disrespect or a lack of mutuality, I now have a different way to reframe those. And so it's not that Del's a racist, it's that Del is working in a pattern that maybe I don't appreciate or is not my pattern. And once you can have people understand their work styles, then those dialogues become much better. And so if you haven't looked at DISC as a DEI tool, I think you really need to explore that one. Another good course that's out there is Crucial Conversations. Crucial Conversations by Vital Smarts, a pretty good program that outlines a process to have the hard conversations. Now, I don't find it as effective as the 6 Thinking Hats, because the 6 Thinking Hats is so much easier to implement. It's simpler, it's easier to remember. Crucial Conversations sort of encodes their program into sort of specialized language, which is a little bit, you have to kind of get over the language part of it. And it's a little bit, the techniques all work, but it's hard to remember how to do them. So instead, I would offer something called a value scan. This comes from DeBono's course on values. And in the 6 value metals course, there are 6 different areas or types of impact. And so, when you're rolling out DEI work, there's always balancing interests. Somebody has a strong opinion one way or needs to have, the results a certain way. And when those interests collide, you have to make hard decisions about which one will get the money, which one will get the time, which one will get the attention, which tends to be the scarcest resource I'm finding. And 3 of those metals are listed here. Silver, what's the bottom line financial impact? Gold, what is the impact on people? And then brass, what is the public perception impact? And what I found is that oftentimes members of the C-suite will be asking these questions, but they don't have a language or a template to use to put this into just regular conversation. And so with the 6 value metals, what you end up having is a way to talk about what's important and what impacts you're trying to get. And so I can imagine if you were doing a briefing to the senior leaders and you wanted to go through why this DEI program is so important, you could use the value metals to show how this program will impact these 3 areas. How will it impact retention and engagement? How it will impact the bottom line? How it will impact the public perception and potentially our hiring policy. Okay. Again, I've tried to go through this quick because I want you to have time to dialogue and have questions. But what we're looking at here are a set of tools by Edward de Bono, and all of them are designed to shift perspective. And so whether it's done in the context of communication or decision making or creativity or simplifying things, each one has its benefit. And what I'm starting to see is that your standard DEI programs are good at one thing, but they're not good at these things. And so when you bring this alongside, you now give people tools to have the conversations about the things that they've learned in their DEI training. I'm going to stop there just for a minute. Remember, this is Resources Unlimited, so you have unlimited resources. And what Tanya and I wanted to do today was just give you a heads up about these other courses. And I hope by sharing some of the best practices, you can see there's lots of options here. But we really believe that the de Bono stuff is just fantastic right now. Let me stop there, see if you have any questions. If you want to come off mute, that's fine. If you want to type in chat, let me be quiet for a minute and just let you give me your insights so far.
Phil, this is Del.
Yeah, Del.
If you could hear me. Hey, thank you so much for going over this. I have been taking some copious notes here, and I was fortunate enough to get a certification in DISC, and I work for the University of Tennessee, and my clients are municipalities. And so one of the top requests, I should say, for training, because I am a training consultant, is leadership training. And through leadership training and also customer service. So some of these resources you already put up, or want to kind of dive into and learn a little bit more. And the DISC has been well received. I'm not promoting them by any means. I've done Myers-Briggs. I've gone through quite a few, but this is just kind of what they've looked at.
Yeah. No, that's really
I was going to say. Yeah, it is. It really is. And then kind of, it's almost like blending the two of diversity and inclusion, which we do, right, with the books reading and movie watching and stuff. So I think our team has done a fantastic job. But when I'm actually presenting and so forth, you can see, oh, I'm here because my manager made me sit here. And, kind of regardless of that topic that everybody has mentioned before. And I always find it challenging to kind of break that ice with them and say, hey, I know your manager put you here. Yeah, here you go with these 3 books. And there was a slide, forgive me for not recalling exactly what it was. But how can we improve, as I'm talking to the manager, and this is very long-winded, I apologize, and consulting with the manager, how can I tee that up, do you think, a little bit better to set those expectations, right? Should I say, hey, here's a resource for you to just make sure you really tee this up the right way, like what's in it for them? So that's my question.
Yeah, so a lot of the times when I'm bringing this into a company, I'm doing it at a management level. So I'm
Okay.
either training new supervisors or mid-level managers because they have the biggest impact on their employees.
Okay.
And if once they pick it up, it seems to be more effective at that level than trying to get the busy executives to sort of, filter it down. I don't see that really ever happening well. And so if I can get a new supervisor and train them up right to use six thinking hats, value, impact, that kind of thing, it makes a difference. Lori's question in chat about DISC, one of the ways of thinking about this whole topic is we tend to immediately gravitate to ethnic or race or gender. And while that's, needed, there are other ways of thinking about diversity. And one of them is work style diversity or mental diversity. And what I found is a lot of times my work style is more who I am than my skin color. And sometimes my emotional intelligence is more important, in terms of how I react and interact with people than my gender. And so I'm not disregarding all the work that goes into DEI, but there are other ways to approach hard topics that make them not so hard. And part of that is being able to help everyone see what they have in common. And at the moment where you can demonstrate to them that they have in common a work style with the majority of their peers, it gives them a confidence that they're not the only one who thinks that way. So for instance, with S styles, you're in DISC, they won't necessarily be assertive or take the lead. They're super responsible. They like to keep their promises, but they really would rather stay out of the limelight. And so in a lot of DEI situations, they're the last ones to speak up. They're very concerned about conflict. They're very concerned about harmony. And they're the ones who are fearful and kind of cringe in some of those environments. And so if I can give them an appreciation that, hey, it's okay to have that concern. It's a part of your work style. It's also a part of your empathy and your emotional intelligence. Now it starts to make sense to them why they are sensitive in that way. And I can also do the same thing with the D style and say, you're not really people-centered. You're more task-centered, and that's okay. Your job demands that. It helps you succeed. But we're talking now about the people side of business. And so this is an area that you're almost blind to because you're not looking in this direction. And so it gives you some traction. Lori, there's a lot of other ways, but does that give you a kind of a hint as how it might work?
Yes, thanks very much.
Yeah, and Mary with parallel thinking. So parallel thinking is really what the six thinking hats is about. And there's 3 steps. The first is to set a focus. And that focus will direct the sequence of hats that you use. So each hat just represents a different way of appreciating a topic. So I might say, let's consider the emotions around this topic, or let's consider the benefits or advantages of understanding these issues, or what are the negatives for understanding. And that gives us a chance to pull those apart in their separate components, but also be able to do it collaboratively. So you would set the focus, that would determine the sequence of the hats that you would use, and the hats are just perception prompts. And then you would begin to talk together in one perception at a time. So if Tanya and I were having a conversation, let's say about hiring and the need to broaden our candidate pool, we could first together look at what are the negative impacts of our current system. And we would do that together. And at that moment, the whole game that we're playing is to find the holes, find the risks and challenges and cautions. And even though Tanya is an S style and may not feel comfortable critiquing something, she would be okay because she knows that in this safe environment where we're talking just about negatives, that's how you play. That's what we're supposed to do right now. And so she's more likely to speak up because everyone's doing it. But you don't stay there. Then you shift and you say, okay, now we know what these negative impacts are. What is a creative alternative? What's a different way? And then we would all shift to a creative approach. And at that point, it's everybody's job to come up with solutions and alternatives. We've stopped talking about the negatives, risks, and cautions. Now we're moving forward to what is workable, what might work, what could work. And again, the game has shifted, but because we have signaled that, everybody then can play that game in kind of a way that feels more effective, faster, and also more engaging because we're collaborating as we do it.
And Phil, there's a couple of things that in my experience when I've been facilitating sessions, going back to Lori's question about DISC and DEI efforts, for those organizations that have really brought DISC into their communication culture, it becomes, this is the way we communicate. And it doesn't matter if you're female, male, other gender specific. It doesn't matter what ethnicity you are. It's just the way we communicate. I've done workshops where I've had females who've said, I don't feel like I can be myself because when I'm my strongly inclined D, which is what my natural interaction style is, people may look at me differently than my counterpart, and vice versa. When we look at it from the male and certain styles, what is that perception, so to speak, or depending on your ethnicity, sometimes there's a perception there. So bringing something in such as DISC, where it really talks about, this is the way I communicate. It doesn't matter. And when I say it doesn't matter, the way you interact should not have, it shouldn't matter if what your ethnicity is or what your gender is. This is the way I communicate and interact. So I just wanted to bring that to the conversation, because if you haven't already had those conversations in some of your workshops, if you're newer to DISC, be prepared for some of those either side conversations or conversations that happen amongst the team.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tanya. I love the idea that it just becomes the way you show respect and mutuality, because you can understand where people are coming from in a way you didn't before.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, Lori, that's interesting about DISC is when we present DISC, we help people understand that it's just a small slice of everything that makes up who they are. So their ethnicity, their cultural background, their education, whether they grew up firstborn even, or whatever, all that stuff is a part of what makes up their pizza pie. And DISC is one small slice. It's only about work style, but it's a slice that feels neutral in the sense that, well, I can, if I want to, work in the other three styles. I'm not typecast for the rest of my life. I don't have a tattoo on my forehead that says I'm an I style. That's not how it works. It's that I have a preference about how I work, and I can flex as I need to. So part of what DISC teaches is, even though I have this pattern, when I need to, it's on me, to be mature enough to flex in order to meet the needs of those around me. And so that's another part of the DISC training. It's not just labeling whether you're an extrovert or introvert or something like that. It's saying, when do you need to flex the way you work? And then, Mary, going back to the parallel thinking, that focus statement is so critical. You get that right. And then what it does is it helps you understand, when we're done with this conversation, what's going to be the end product. And that focus statement defines what the output or the end product is. And then the hats are the way you get to that end product. So again, if we're problem solving, there's a hat sequence for that. If we're making a decision, there's a hat sequence for that. If we are brainstorming, trying to come up with some new alternative, a solution, there's a process in terms of which perspectives we go to first, second, and third. So the main ground rules are, when we talk in parallel, we all do the same perspective at the same time, and then we shift, and then we shift, and then we shift. What other questions do you have? We still have a little bit of time left, and I would love to dig a little deeper, but I don't want to just keep talking about stuff unless you have something specific you want to interact with. While you're thinking about that, I will let you know that a lot of these courses we're previewing for you today are available through Resources Unlimited coming up in the next few months. In fact, one of the things that is not on the PowerPoint is strengths. If you've never taken Gallup StrengthsFinders, what it does for an individual is really helps engage them in those areas that they are talented. So it's not telling you what you do wrong, it's telling you what you do right. And that gives a sense of pride, a sense of presence, a sense of motivation and expertise if you can stay working in the areas where you have a natural advantage. And learning what that natural advantage is what strengths is all about. Any other questions or thoughts or observations? I would love to hear them if you have them. You can type into chat or just come off mute either way. Thanks, Lori.
And for those of you that are interested, that haven't really been introduced to the De Bono methodologies, the 6 thinking hats, the power perception, which is my favorite tool set. We have a couple of classes that are coming up. I believe in May, because you guys attended the webinar today, there will be a discount. I absolutely love the parallel thinking tools. If you've got any additional questions, absolutely reach out to me or to Phil, but you want something that wows the folks. And you need something that kind of brings everything together. In my opinion, and parallel thinking is one of those methodologies that was really, really big, Phil, back in the early 2000s, that we had some massive organizations, large organizations that used parallel thinking in several different of their training programs, all the way from the tip-top leadership all the way down. This method has the ability to change the way you communicate with one another. So if you have some additional questions about that, if you're interested, if you're like, wait a minute, I'm interested, but should I spend budget dollars on exploring this program? Absolutely reach out to Phil or I.
It's great to be with you today. We're going to close out here in a minute, but we'd love to stay and chat with you if you'd like.